Hey everybody, I'm George Rouse from Archery Learning Center. I'm here at Last Chance Archery and I'm about to start a new thing a week. It's thing a week time. This is my son Quinn.
Hello.
He's my oldest and you just had an 18th birthday. He's 18. How did that happen? We were filming the first thing a weeks and he was tiny running around in the range. You may see him in the background in some of my videos, you know, here and there. What we're going to do today is we are going to go through what I call the Big Four. And the reason that the Big Four exists is it is a very clean, very compact method to make sure that you are handling your bow, your release, your grip, all of those things. You're approaching the target in a very controlled and consistent way. Because this bow here, if I just, it in itself is as consistent as it can be. Even if it's out of tune, if you pull it back to full draw and release it, it's going to do the same thing exactly every single time you let go. If it's out of tune, it may not be good, but it'll be bad the exact same way, right? So the bow itself is inherently consistent. So when we have a consistency issue, usually it's the squishy part in between the release and the bow grip is where the inconsistency comes from. So if you approach your setup, how you draw the bow, how you get in the bow, and how you put the bow on the target, if you do that in a very controlled and consistent way, you will have dramatic improvement in your scores. Many people, when they take lessons from me, oh, I forgot to tell them they can take lessons from me. You can take lessons from me at improvemyarchery.com. You can get in-person lessons. You can get remote lessons. If it's remote, we meet on Zoom, and you set your phone up in a tripod, and I talk to you, and you shoot, and then I can give you help there. Or you can set an in-person lesson where you show up at my archery shop, you shoot in my range, and we can do everything that you want, and I can cover anything. Doesn't matter whether if you're Olympic recurve, bare bow, compound, traditional, I can help anybody with anything. Archery is my life. So improvemyarchery.com, and you can get lessons from me, and you will hear from me about the Big Four. So here is the first step, step one in the Big Four. So we are the one that supplies the inconsistency in the shot. So by setting yourself up and getting in the bow and getting your hand in the release and all of that in a consistent way, you create a very consistent basis from which to shoot from. And the first step, Quinn, go ahead and grab your bow. The first step here is actually just getting the arrow on the string, getting the release on the D-loop, getting your fingers in the release and getting the grip. That's step one. In all of the coaching manuals, they would call this particular step set up. This is how you kind of get everything started. So if you have a little thing, if your peep doesn't quite turn, you got to give it a little thing, that's when you do it. So go ahead and put your release on the string. Now, the first part of this in step one is getting your fingers the proper depth in the string. So he can turn his hand over and he can look at his fingers and see how he has his fingers in there and make sure that the depth of his fingers in the release is exactly the way he wants it before he does anything. The kiss of death for an archery shot is if you pull the bow back to full draw and then make adjustments to your hand and the release at full draw, you will never be able to make that consistent, right? So you got to set it here where you can see it and feel it, right? So he's going to turn this over and he's going to set his hand angle to the angle that he's going to be at full draw so he can see it and make sure that it's right. Now also, when I set my fingers, I'm going to step over here so Jonathan can get a close-up of this. When I set my fingers in the release, if I'm using a thumb button, I'll take my thumb and kind of test where my thumb is to make sure that it's right. And once I'm in the right position, I just take my thumb away and then draw the bow back. because I need a little compression in this knuckle so when I stretch through the release, I can pull the trigger. So I set that compression. Like right now, my hand's totally flat, and you see my thumb doesn't really reach the trigger properly, right? But when I set a little bit of bend in that knuckle, then my thumb fits the trigger just as I like it right there. So then the slightest little pull makes the release fire, right? So I use my thumb to make sure that it's right, and I make sure that this depth is all the way in the release right there. The reason that you have to look at this and make sure that it's right, because if I change the depth just that much, it'll make my release significantly faster. If I make the depth just that much deeper, it'll make my release significantly slower. And that will make your shot timing all over the place, just that tiny little bit. So look and feel and set the depth of the release. The next thing that you'll do, once you've got your fingers in the release, you kind of tip the bow forward and you make sure that your arm is kind of normal to the grip. He's got it sitting here on his hip, and then he sets his hand in the bow and he can look and feel and make sure that that hand position is just right. Now, Quinn, put a little pressure against the grip, and what we're going to do is pretend that you actually shot this so that it makes a mark on your hand. And then take your hand out like that and show it to Jonathan. And you see right here, do that one more time. Just kind of put the stabilizer against the floor and just kind of push on it, just to kind of simulate that you drew it, and then take your hand out and hold it like that. So you can see the impression of where the grip is. So if he had actually been shooting and I see that this red zone right up here is really high, that he's not actually getting consistent pressure over the whole grip surface. So he would need to make corrections there. But when you're done shooting, you can look at the inside of your hand. Is it red up here? Is it red down here? Do you have a really sharp, neat impression of the grip in your hand after shooting 3 shots? Or is there 3 grip impressions? Or is it just cloudy? So that tells you that that grip position is actually different. And the best way to get that in the grip is you turn your hand over flat to the floor. You'll point your thumb at the target like that. So that lines this little V up to your forearm. And then with this open and point, so this part of your thumb can see the target, you do a little light squeeze right here between your thumb and forefinger on the grip. And that makes sure that the pressure makes that align with your forearm. And it also makes sure that you're not letting your hand position melt and change your left-rights. Because when you put that little squeeze on, it turns your wrist on. It sets the position of this V in accordance to your arm, and it makes sure that all of this is consistent. So go ahead, Quinn, and put your hand in there so they can kind of see what you're doing. You put it in there, then a little light squeeze, and then down over the whole grip surface. And you'll leave that squeeze pressure turned on all the way through step 4 in the big 4, right? All the way through follow through, that stays on and active to make sure that this step has already been done. So this is step 1, fingers, grip. Next, he's going to set himself up to the target. Now, here's the target's this way. And he'll set himself up to the target. And what we're looking for is he goes fingers, grip, and he looks up at the target. He's got his stance and everything set. Then he's going to take a big, deep breath. And then, like that. And you sit down on your hips. You lower your chest so that you have balance and strength, right? And you're sitting down on your hips. And all this is before that you raise the bow. And that big, deep breath, the reason that we do that big, deep breath is it creates a little relaxation. And if you've ever noticed when you're in a big tournament, you've noticed this before, if you're in a big tournament, the first arrow is okay. Then the second arrow has just a little bit more anxiety, right? And then the third arrow is really bad, right? And that goes end after end, and the tension just builds and builds and builds. Well, instead, when you take that big deep breath, you clear a little bit of that anxiety. Your heart rate goes bump, 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 and it slows down. And that effect of that big deep breath and it's slowing your heart rate a little bit lasts about 20 seconds before everything normalizes again. And 20 seconds is plenty of time to take a shot.
Yeah,
right?
Should be.
So you can shoot your first arrow, set up, breathe, shoot that arrow, load your third arrow, set up, breathe, and then shoot your third arrow. So each shot, you're a little bit closer to your 0 point rather than letting the anxiety and tension build arrow after arrow after arrow. And just that simple step of taking a breath will make sure that you're a little bit closer to your 0 point, and it will raise your scores. If you're really good, you'll see your X count go up quite a bit. If you're new, you'll see your actual points go up quite a bit. So kind of demo that. You'll get your hand, get your fingers, get your hand, get your grip. You put your nose on the target and then take the breath. And that is step 1 in the big 4. So watch out for us next week and we'll get to step 2. All of you practice this all this week, and then next week, step 2, we're going to pull the bow back and get ready.